That's not annoying.
Right.
All right. So here we are. I guess we're going to start. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fiveable Crams 2024 AP Comparative Government. This is night 2. Oh, I should be the camera. Night 2 of our the free nights. We hope to see you next week. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. This is our group. My name is Sean Jacobson. I am the teacher of this group. Not that I taught them, but I teach in New York City, and been teaching Comp Gov for 10 or 15 years, something like that. Next, I have Nishka.
Oh, hi. My name is Nishka. I am from Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm a senior. I took COGO last year, first semester, and yeah, I'm excited to meet you guys and meet with you today.
Okay, am I next?
Yeah, sorry.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you again. My name is Isabella, but y'all can call me Bella. I'm actually a senior in college at the University of Denver, majoring in political science and economics. So welcome again. And Zach, you're next.
Hey, welcome everybody that came back, and whoever is new, welcome. I'm glad that you could join us tonight. We're all looking forward to it. My name is Zach. I'm a sophomore at the Math and Science Academy in Minnesota. I did AP Comparative Government last year. I self-studied for it. Yeah, I'm looking forward.
Zach, real quick, what was your grade on that?
Oh, I got a 5.
Ooh, Bella, you took this exam?
Ooh.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I took it 5 years ago, and I did get a 5 too.
Nishka, did you take this exam?
Yes, I did take the exam this year. I got a 5.
You got a 5. Look at that. All right. And Johnny, no pressure.
Oh, luckily I did get a 5, so not the odd one out here. But I'm Anjani. I'm from Gainesville, Florida. I'm a senior. I took it last year with U.S. government, and I love this class. So excited to see you guys here. And David, your turn.
All right. Hey guys, I'll be starting us off today, but I'm David Marin. I'm from Miami, Florida. I self-studied comparative government last year, last half of last year. I also happened to receive a 5, what a coincidence. And this fall, I will be attending Boston University, majoring in international relations and philosophy.
David, don't sell yourself short. You earned a 5. You didn't receive a 5. You earned it.
Oh, yeah. You worked hard for it.
Okay, that's the last thing. All right, here we go.
It's great to be with all of you. And to all of you who came back, we were really happy that you came back. So let's get this show on the road.
And Fatima, we'll answer your question for sure. We just got to go through some technical stuff first, and then we'll get to your question, okay?
Alrighty. Okay. So, again, welcome. Today, for our second night of our previews, we're going to be going again over our welcome first. We're going to be going over federal versus unitary systems. Then we'll be reviewing executive systems. Then we will be doing a small little practice MCQ. I'm not sure. And then civil rights and civil liberties, and then political party systems. I think we're only doing one practice quiz today, though. So as it says there in the bottom, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. We have a wonderful team of hosts here today that are here to support you in all of your questions. Just an FYI, I think if we can get on the next slide, please. Okay, we're not there yet. So, community agreements. These are pushed forth by Fiveable, and there are definitely things to keep in mind as we do these crams and as you study for your cram session, for your AP exams. Sorry. So number 1 is to be supportive. We always have to lift each other up and support each other through our studies, because it's a very stressful time for all of us. So it's really very important. Another thing is to be patient. We have, starting after tonight, we have 5 nights that are all 3 hours long together. So we need to be understanding and patient of our questions and be eager to answer other people's questions. What you know isn't what other people know. So of course that's very important when you're studying with a group of people. And then lastly is be kind. So we're all real people. We have our lives. We have a personality behind the screen. So number one is to be patient. So thank you. All right, so let's go over our schedule for the comparative government crams and how we're gonna go over them. So on May 3rd, which I believe is Saturday, right? Yeah, should be Saturday. Friday. Sorry, I have miscalculated my dates. Each of these days we're gonna go 3 hours worth of content. I won't be going in depth into what the content is specifically. I guess you'll have to come and see. But each night we'll go in depth into like each. Well, should I?
Yeah, I let me fill that in because I did that, and maybe you don't know. So on May 3rd, we're going to do Unit 1, a little bit of Unit 5. On May 4th, we're going to do Unit 2 with a little bit of Unit 5. On May 5th, we're going to do Unit 3. Guess what? With a little bit of Unit 5. And May 6th, we're going to do Unit 4 with a little bit of Unit 5. Now, May 7th is going to be exciting because that's when we're going to not leave it up to you guys, but you're going to come with your questions. We're going to tell you, hey, this is how to do the FRQs. This is what the multiple choice looks like. These are all the things that we want, but you're going to come with all the questions, and you're going to just ask all the things that you want to learn and all the things that you want to remember, all the hints, all the things that you need to do. I'm going to stop talking now.
You guys are extremely lucky that, well, it's a blessing and a curse, but comparative government tends to be an extremely small course with an extremely small demand of people. So we're a host group that is almost readily available. That is almost always readily available to you. Your questions will be answered and you will be heard. Your comments will be answered and heard. So I guess that's definitely a benefit of being in this class, and we will make sure to be there for you. So we will be that support system for you. It's not like an AP Bio or an AP Lang where there are so many people, so many questions that it might be difficult to reach one question or a couple. So we will be here, and I guess that's really nice to know. So next slide, please. So what is Cram mode? So I guess, I don't know if that's been 100% clear or maybe not 100% clear by Fiveable, but Cram mode is basically a cram session that Fiveable sells that you're able to unlock 40 prep books and ace whatever test that you got on deck. It gives you all the tools necessary to receive a 5 on your AP exam or do well on your SAT and ACT tests. So it's 40 prep books on one platform, which is the Fiveable platform for your AP, SAT, and ACT needs. You receive 24/7 access to over 200,000 unique practice questions. They are wonderful practice questions and an amazing question bank for you to practice off of. They have easy, medium, and hard questions, and extremely hard questions, so you can really test your knowledge. And then it gives you tickets to all nights of Cram events for every course that you will be taking. So like this year, I will be taking 7 exams, and the Cram sessions will definitely be a massive help in reaching like those like depths of knowledge those pockets of knowledge that I need to fill in. So definitely something to consider while you're going through your Fiveable journey. So how to make the most of a Cram finale? If you decide to sign up for your finales and take on this commitment, there are a couple things that you need to do. So notes, like anything, writing down something and bringing it from here to pen and paper will always be extremely useful. So keep actively writing notes, anything that we write down, and any questions that you might have, so you do not forget them. Any mnemonics that you create, any questions that you create, and a to-do list that you have will be extremely useful when you come time to do the exam. And don't be afraid to share them with the other people in this chat. As like I mentioned, this is an extremely small course, and it also happens to be a small study group. So sharing these types of things in the chat will be useful in learning more and connecting as a study group. So keep that in mind. So there's stuff on the Fiveable website of your profile. Once you sign up for the Cram finale, is the My Stuff section that will have all the slides, the review packets, and the replays for you of the replays of these Crowdcast events for your disposition, if you're studying late at night, or if you live in a different time zone, if you're just not able to make it to these, or if you want to follow along with the packets and the slides as we teach. So again, that will make your cram finales the most efficient. The group chat, I believe there's a group chat, or if not, please feel free to create one for sharing tips and participate when you guys are asking questions. So as I mentioned in the notes section, anything that you guys come up with, any mnemonics, any questions, you guys should definitely share it. Learning comes from when you teach other people about the content that you're trying to learn. So sharing what you write down, the mnemonics that you create, any questions that you come up with will definitely help you earn that 5. And then the Q&A tab, just feel free to ask questions. We're here to answer your questions. So using those questions will be extremely great when you're trying to fill in those pockets of knowledge that you have. So yes, it is a 3-hour event, but we will take breaks, and the replay will be available. So you don't have to worry about missing certain sections, or although you won't get us live interaction, that's for sure. But we will be taking breaks here and there for your comfort and of course ours, because we understand that 3 hours just going on and on and on may be a little bit draining for anybody, especially for 5 days in a row. So we do understand that. And next slide, please. All right, so this is what I was gonna get into a little bit earlier. So for the people unfamiliar with Crowdcast, on the Crowdcast features, if you look to the right of your screen, there should be a chat box that you're able to chat with everybody else in this chat. Our hosts, or my fellow hosts, will be active in there, answering your questions, talking with you guys. We want to know more about you. And then if you guys have any questions pertaining to the slides, pertaining to the topics, please feel free to do that in the questions tab that's right below the chat. And I noticed that Fatima put a question there that I believe we will tackle a little bit later after we get through this. But any questions that pertain to the course itself, or any questions that you believe are of extreme importance to everybody else, please put them there. Don't hesitate to put them there. And then our polls, when we do them, will be right below that. We're going to send out polls to find out more about you, to find out more about how you feel about certain parts of the course. So that'll be exciting. If you were here last time, we tried to make our best use of those. So we'll do that today as well. Next slide, please. All right. So today I'm going to start off going over federal and unitary systems in comparative government, which is a part of Unit 1. So I'll just read off the sign, and then I'll go a little bit more in depth into how each country does each federal and unitary system. So a federal system is when the power is divided between the central government and the regional government in the country. So power tends to be allocated to different parts of the country, and there tends to be a hierarchy, but there still is a lot of power reserved in other governments that's not the central governments. So dispersing power, increasing citizen participation, and multiple levels of government action, you tend to be the trend in federal systems, which is mostly pros. But the cons that federal system also have is like inefficiency in addressing national issues and a lot of disparities among regions themselves. So although it tends to straddle the line of authoritarian and democratic regimes a little bit, federal systems tend to be Mexico, Nigeria, and Russia. Mexico is actually divided into states like the United States, similar to the United States, and each state has its own governing power over its own jurisdiction and citizenry, and it has decision-making power in the capital, in Mexico City. Same thing with Nigeria, especially with the divide between the north and south and the religious divides. There is power allocated to both regions of the country, and I don't remember the specific number of states, and 30-something states. Russia is similar in the sense that the different regions of Russia, although they all have different levels of how they're able to govern themselves, the different Russian regions are able to let's see, I lost this. may govern for the most part the citizenry to an extent, though it all has to be with approval and not with the oversight of Moscow and the Kremlin. So unitary systems. So federal systems, you can think of it as a flower where there's a lot of different parts to the flower. But the unitary system, you can think of it as only and solely the bud, the central part. The unitary system is where a strong central government controls all the subnational governments and has complete jurisdiction over almost all decision making in the country. So what are the pros of this system? Unitary systems tend to show a very clear authority, and they're also very efficient in responding to crisis and in making decisions. Though there is a lot of difficulty in addressing local needs, which is also called hypercentralism. So this is not usually a problem in smaller countries, and smaller countries do tend to be extremely unitary. But in countries that are extremely diverse or have a lot of ethnic groups, this tends to be a much bigger issue because your government is not able to hear all the issues of a citizenry, which just creates a boiling pot of problems, which could lead to a lot of dissidence and could even lead to collapse. So Iran is a big indicative of this with the supreme leader and the theocracy, where every decision, everything has to lie through the modulus and the supreme leader's decisions. China is the same way with the National Party Congress and the Politburo Committee, where all decisions and everything is gone through China, whether it's local or federal. All decisions are made through here. Now, the United Kingdom is a little bit different because the United Kingdom appoints representatives from all jurisdictions of the country. But it is different because once these representatives are selected, they are the ones who make decisions for the entire country. The United Kingdom tends to be on the smaller side of countries a little bit, so this isn't a massive problem. And there's because you pull from representatives of different parts of the country, there tends to be representation of all issues. But this has caused some crisis in the United Kingdom over some years. So there's definitely pros and cons to both types of systems. This is up to where I go now. I'm not sure who goes next. I think it might be Nishka. But it was great being with you guys today. Oh, it's Bella. No, not Bella.
No, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just I'm gonna release a poll. Let me make it visible. So this poll is visible for you guys right now. So we want to know, how do you call the course? Do you call it AP Cogo or AP Comp? I think this has been a matter of contention in our team, and I think the AP Cogo folks are the minority. But that it was a surprise. Actually, it was more 50-50 last session, so we just wanted to hear from you guys. Now I'll yield the floor to Nishka.
But it's obviously AP Comp Gov. Nishka, you're a horrible person for thinking it's Kogo. Sorry.
Are we allowed to vote? Because I want to vote.
No,
it doesn't let us.
That's ridiculous. I'm going to sign in as somebody else.
Mr. Jacobson tends to be the most passionate person on this subject.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move on.
Please prove him wrong.
Is there somebody out there that calls it something differently? We learned the last time it was AP
Copo.
Yeah.
If there's something, put something in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. It's fun when we hear from you.
All right. So hi guys. My name's Nishka, and I'm going to be talking about term limits. So if someone can hit the next slide, please. All right. Also, before the poll, I have 7 people who agree with me. Just letting you know that there are people out there who agree with me. Okay. Anyways, so
7 people to the 15 that disagree with you. To make that clear, yeah.
There also tends to be a part of our human population who's psychopaths. No.
Well, we're not saying that people that. Let's not go that far. That might not be.
In the chat.
All right. So we're going to talk about term limits for head of states and head of governments. So just To clarify, term limits are how many years the head of state or the head of government can serve before they are either reelected or forced to resign. So some pros are term limits are that they can bring new ideas, because if people are limited to only running for X amount of years, this means more turnover within the government. So there are new leaders and old leaders aren't stuck in office. And we can see with new leaders, new ideas, new innovation and growth for the country. If you can go to the next part. And it also serves as a great check, especially on the executive power, as with term limits, it really does force the executive out of office. So they aren't able to form an authoritarian regime or form a dictatorship, because they have to get out of power after their term limit is over. And it prevents a single person from ruling as, for example, as like a dictator does, a personality rule, that's what it's called. So it is a check to make sure that we keep democracy in place in whatever government regime. If you can go to the next one, please. And finally, it promotes accountability, because if officials only have a set number of limits, they only have a certain amount of time to really push the agendas that they want. So they're forced to enact policies as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So they can't just sit and do nothing. And they also, if they have the ability to be reelected, also have to worry about public approval and worry about doing things for the good of the nation, because their reelection is based on it. So yeah. So some cons of term limits, if you can click next again, please. Thank you. So first, some cons are that it prevents any politician or a party from experiencing, from gaining experience potential for poor policy, because there's such a short term limit. You aren't able to sustain the length of your policy. You aren't able to learn from your mistakes, and you kind of really only have 1 or 2 goes to enact policy and really create change. So the ability for long-term impact can be negligent if you only have certain years in office. If you can hit next, please. All right. And then secondly, with a lot of turnover, there can be a less sustainable government, as if we have high rates of turnover, we see multiple parties have the ability to come in office. So you could have one party and then another party that undoes the action of the previous policy, and then another party that undoes the actions of the previous policy, and so on. So, with the fight for different parties and the frequent turnover in different governmental officials, it's hard to have long-term sustainable policies where everyone can agree on. And most of the time, since these parties are competing, they typically overrule or overturn the work of the previous administration. If I can get the next one, please. And then finally, there is a petition for lame duck if there's only one period or the person's on their last term, which goes to basically say that if the politician doesn't have to worry about re-election, they sometimes do nothing or aren't as efficient, because they know their re-election, they're in office and they don't really care about the popular vote. They don't really, it doesn't matter to them. Which it should, but unfortunately, some politicians don't care, so they can create a lame duck period in government where people aren't, bills aren't being passed and the government isn't working as efficiently, and that can even turn into gridlock.
It's like senioritis.
All right. So let's explain the term limits for some of the countries of our AP Comp 6. So just clarification, HOS means head of state and HOG means head of government. So I'm just letting you know. So for the United Kingdom, the head of state has no term limits. And just to be clear, the head of state is the monarchy. And typically in some countries, head of states are really just representative and for show. For example, the monarchy in the United Kingdom has very little, if any, political power. It's really the head of government, which is the parliament, and they are elected every 5 years. So similar to our US 4-year terms, they have elections every 5 years, and they are a plurality system. Moving on to Mexico, both the head of state and the head of government, so the president and their congressional system, are elected every 6 years, pretty clean and simple. Moving down to China, so the head of state abolished term limits. So there is no terms for the head of state, so theoretically they could be there for as long or as little as they wanted. But again, China isn't exactly a democracy and is more of an authoritarian state. So this head of state, who is Xi Jinping, the president, would typically want to be into office for as long as possible. But the head of governments are 2 5-year terms. So these are their National People's Congress, and they can serve 2 times for 5 years. Moving on to Nigeria, for them, both their House or head of state and head of government can serve for 2 4-year terms. So just like our president, pretty clean and simple. Moving on to Russia, again, similar to China, Russia is more of an authoritarian regime with a less democratic presence. So technically, under their congressional district, the head of state and the head of government can serve 2 6-year terms, but sort of. As we've seen, Putin has kind of used the semi-presidential system, which we covered in our last preview, to his advantage to switch between prime minister and then the president, and then prime minister and then the president to kind of extend his 6 terms. And he uses both the powers of the head of state and the head of government. So technically they're 6-term limits, but since he's getting elected over and over again, he's able to run. So as kind of a technicality, you should know that even though it's there, because Russia is authoritarian, it's not as democratic due to term limits. And then finally, we look to Iran. Their Their head of state has no term limits. Again, this is the Majalis, which is the supreme leader. So unlike the United Kingdom, though, the supreme leader does have a lot of the power and it has a lot of the final say in a majority of things. Remember that Iran is a theocracy, so a lot of their policies are governed by Islamic law and Islamic rules. So that's why the head of state is really kind of their religious and governmental leader, and he is there for as long as he wants to be in office, essentially. But then the head of government, the Majalis, the Congress, serve 2 4-year terms, but they also have to be approved by the Guardian Council as well as the supreme leader. So not super.
I guess I just wanted to add, I'm so sorry, Nishka.
No, go ahead.
That authoritarian regimes, even though they might stipulate term limits in their actual documents, remember that these countries are rule of law. So they can definitely modify whatever documents that they have in order to extend their term limits or move their term limits in a way that they could extend their amount of power or stay in office for life.
Yeah.
So I guess I wouldn't say take them with a grain of salt, but term limits in authoritarian regimes tend to be a lot more fluid than in democratic regimes, or like in the UK, for example.
Yeah, David just got to exactly what the next slide is. He was a little ahead on the game on that.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. What he was saying was completely correct. So what we covered in the last one, rule of law or rule by law. So again, we can see that Russia and China are 2 authoritarian regimes. So technically, they do have the term limits that I previously outlined, but we've seen throughout history that they can change it at their whim to, help whoever is in charge and I guess allow them to gain. So specifically looking at Russia and China, again, like David mentioned, so Russia, we can see that after serving 2 4-year terms in 2008, Putin switched from the position of prime minister, switched positions with the prime minister, so they basically swapped, like I mentioned earlier, and then extended the term limits to 6 years again, and then he pushed for a reset on his term limits. So he's essentially switching between prime minister and president, and also what, like David said, extending the term limits. So, they do have term limits, but if the government can kind of change them on whim of the head of state's request, it is not technically a term limit. It's just there for namesake. And then China, Xi Jinping abolished term limits for the head of government in 2008. So, yeah, if I can see the next slide.
Oh no, our person sharing the screen was kicked out. Okay, technical difficulties, you guys. Let me try to share it.
I just got kicked out. So weird, guys. Here, I'm back. Sorry.
That sounds good. You're all good.
Can we see it now?
Cool.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right, well, that's all I had for you. So thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions about term limits or just anything else, leave in the chat.
Awesome. So before I get into civil rights and civil liberties, I'm gonna send you guys another poll because I'm the poll girl today, apparently. So how do you study for the content? Was it country by country? Was it by theme, by unit? Or if there's a secret third way in which you did it, let us know in the chat. So last week I talked about political regimes and democratization. So today I'm going to talk about civil rights and civil liberties, which I think is something that is very tied to that. So, Anjani, can you click next, please? Thank you. So, civil rights and civil liberties are very similar concepts, but there is a fundamental difference about them. And the first one, and if you can also click next again, civil rights are about equality. So, when you're thinking about rights like women's right to vote, then they wanted it to be equal. They wanted everyone to have access to that power. When it comes to civil liberties, you're thinking about freedom. So, freedom of the press. So, freedom in a way in which the press can operate without having the government go after them for criticizing the government or something like that. So, since I was talking about political regimes last week, it's very important to note that yes, democratic regimes are doing better when it comes to actually fulfilling people's civil rights and civil liberties. But in other countries that are illiberal democracies or even autocracies, they might have on paper on their constitution yet that they do have those liberties and those rights, or they might outright not have it included at all. But they create this illusion that people have those rights and liberties, but they don't. So that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes they are just shoving it under the rug. They're like, yeah, but in our constitution, it says you have freedom of press. But in practice, it doesn't really happen that way. So can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So now we're going to talk about a few restrictions on the rights and liberties in the core countries. So the first one, China. One of the biggest violations of rights in China is the way they surveil people. So there's this thing called the Great Firewall of China, and it's basically a very intricate scheme in which they have thousands of human monitors, censorship laws, and filtering software so people don't have access to the same information as in other countries. So, in the case of China, for example, some popular platforms that we use here, like Google, Twitter, X, I guess, Facebook, or other types of social media are highly controlled or just banned in China. And this is a way for them to keep people from accessing information that is maybe controversial, that is maybe against the government, right? And that's a fundamental violation of their right to information, and also freedom of the press, right? Another thing that happens in China is surveillance. So they have neighborhood grids of 15 to 20 households with security managers to watch over territories. So they also have a facial recognition thing in which they can identify people, and they have cameras everywhere. So that's basically to track people and make sure that law and order is followed. And that comes with the cost, which is people's rights and liberties. Next one, please. And then there's Russia. Russia and their constitution, they say that they have freedom of the press, but in practice, that doesn't really happen. So they do put a lot of pressure on independent media to acquire or curb independence. So, for example, in the case of the Russian war with the Ukraine, the information that is being put out there is not the real information sometimes, and there's a lot of disinformation that they're putting out there because the media in Russia is highly controlled by the state. They actually have a channel, and I found out about this the other day, that is controlled by their Ministry of Defense. So it's basically the same ministry that controls the military is controlling a TV channel, so, which might be weird to us, but might be common to them because most of those, I guess, media outlets are controlled by the government. Another thing that is a violation of human rights in Russia is the way they treat NGOs. So, non-profit organizations, they are important to civil society. So, last week we learned about how basically civil society is built on all the governments and organizations that are not tied to the government necessarily. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a political motive, right? So the NGOs that are trying to push for advocating human rights in Russia are usually have to register, and they have to go through this whole bureaucratic process of doing it, which is intentional, right? It's intentional because they don't want NGOs to operate there. And there's restricted religion. So as you probably studied, the Russian Orthodox, and man, I cannot say that word, is church is like the dominant religion there. So in that way, anything that is considered extremist cannot be entertained in schools. They cannot learn about it. So by controlling religion as well is a way in which Russia can control people. Next one. Iran. Okay. So there's a long list of violation of human rights and liberties in Iran, but the first one that I think is something that is more recent is the Mahsa Amini protests. So Mahsa was a young lady. She was about 20 when she was arrested by the Iranian police, and she was killed. According to them, she was killed at the police headquarters, but that kind of sparked a wave in protests in Iran, and right after that, they followed with different types of protests. So in 2019, 2020, people were highly unhappy about the economic state of the country. So they protested about that, as well as other things such as women's rights. And as a result, the Iranian government shut down social media and the internet for 6 days. So that is a little different from China, that actually people there have access, quote unquote, to the internet, to those outlets, but they have this intricate system to control them and to make sure that they're not consuming the type of content they don't want them to consume. In the case of Iran, maybe they don't have as much of a complex technological base that they just shut down the media. And that's a very clear signal of, yeah, we don't want you guys to go around and kind of ruin our image to the world by showing how bad that of a job that we were doing. So that's both to kind of bar like internal and external threats. And last but not least, the restriction of publishing anti-religious material or information that goes against what they call the Sharia law is also highly condemned in the country. But something to keep in mind is, as we were talking about, and Nishka kind of touched on a little bit as well, is the fact that people are in Iran are above the law, right? So the moment in which they have protections of civil rights and liberties included in the Constitution, that doesn't mean they're following them. And that's something that you keep in mind as you're studying those case studies for you to write on your exam about. And I believe this might be my last slide. So I will go back to the wing.
Zach,
Hello,
you're muted.
everyone. Sorry. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about party systems. So we could get to the first one, please. Okay, so the first party system we're going to be talking about is the one-party system. And it's kind of what it sounds like, right? One political party is permanently in control, and the forming of other political parties is forbidden. When you think of a one-party system, think of China. The CCP and the government as a whole are pretty much intertwined together. They're infused. You can't really separate them. You can't really separate them apart, and that makes forming minor parties or parties to challenge the status quo impossible. And I'll talk more about the CCP a little bit in the next slide. If I can then go to the two-party system, it's again, the names for these are pretty self-explanatory. Two parties dominate the political field in all levels of government, right? Whether that be local, federal, state by state. Does this mean that countries do not have civil restrictions? Bella, you covered that. Do you want to actually take that question really quick? That's a good question.
Oh, I see the question in the chat. So does it mean that countries like Mexico, UK, and Nigeria do not have civil restrictions? Let me go back to, not the main wing. That is a great question. Not at all. I mean, when you're talking about democracies, it's a whole spectrum, right? So there are civil restrictions. I guess it really depends on what you mean by civil restrictions. If you're talking about civil rights and civil liberties, just think about in the case of Mexico, how many femicides happen there. So that's a clear violation of women's rights, a right to live, right? So technically, on paper, on the law, this is not supposed to happen, but it does happen, and that what makes it an imperfect democracy. I hope that answers the question, but we can elaborate on that more later.
I guess if I could add just a tiny bit, the restrictions on the civil restrictions tend to be like a big thing in terms of our social contract with our government. So when you are a citizen of a country, some of your civil rights will be restricted. That's just point in period. If it's in a democratic regime or an authoritarian regime, as Bella said, it's a spectrum. But there will be some restrictions on the citizenry, based on many other things or just problems that the country faces.
Yeah, but we didn't include the other countries because this is just a preview, but definitely, like, not all countries have perfect protection of civil rights and liberties. I think
no country does,
that
to
in
be
mind.
honest.
Yeah.
All right, Zach.
Okay. All right. I'll go back. Two-party system. I think I was more or less at the end of it. And I'm going to get to the questions that I see in the chat right now because I actually have a question about it, but I'll get there in a moment. But with the two-party system, two parties dominate the political field. In the case of Nigeria, it's the All Progressive Congress versus the People's Democratic Party. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And the last one is the multi-party system. Again, it's like what the name implies. It's a multiple parties across the political spectrum run for national elections and are able to gain control of government offices. And this often leads to coalitions being formed, so that way majorities can be had. And again, this slide is mostly just a preview. I'm going to get into more of that later. But really quick, because I see we're talking about it in the chat too, which is really good. This is actually missing one of the party systems. Do any of you know what that party system is? And it's very, very similar to the one-party system, but it has like a key difference that Comp Gov will note. And it applies to Russia. That's my hint. I'm not seeing any guesses right now. There could be a delay on my end. But I'll just say it. It's a dominant party system in the case of Russia. So, hey, we got one. Looks like we got one person. So in the case of Russia, there's the United Russia Party, right? Which has pretty much complete control over the government, and they win every election. And there are other political parties that are allowed to form. However, they are not likely to actually win an election to actually dethrone the United Russia Party. And that's what makes it different from a one-party system, because a one-party system does not allow other political parties to be formed compared to the dominant party system, which allows political parties to be formed, but it has more, it still has that permanent control or permanent-ish control, and uses its tools to stay as the only party that's actually in power. So I hope that makes sense, and you can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk about country by country. Like I said before, the CCP and the government of China are pretty much intertwined with each other. You can't really separate one from the other, which is what makes it a one-party system and not a dominant party system, because there are no other political parties that are allowed to be formed. So the CCP controls the government, and it controls the military too. I had another question that popped up on the screen before it disappeared.
Yeah, that was, I saw the question. I was actually about to answer it, but I think I accidentally pressed something.
How
I think you pressed answered.
Yeah.
how do elections work?
Yeah, in the UK.
Here, I'll get into this on the next slide too, because there is a section. It's about political cleavages, but yeah, I'll get that there. So I'll leave that there for now.
If I'm sorry, if the person who wants to ask the question again, I'll give you a written response. Like, I'd be more than happy to. I'm just sorry I accidentally pressed something that I should have. So, if you guys could do that, that'd be great.
Okay. So, yeah, we went over China. So for Mexico, Mexico was basically a one-party system up until 2000, in which it split into a main three-party system. And this allows the parties to form coalitions and gives for a greater perspective and diversity of thought. And it's a good example of how Mexico has gone on the ladder to democratization. This is a very important moment when it becomes a one-party dominant state to now having a multi-party system. And this is a very important thing. So if you're ever asked about on the AP exam, an example of how Mexico democratized, this is a good example of the dominant party losing its grip on power and a multi-party system taking place. In Nigeria has two strong parties, like I previously mentioned, the PDP and the APC. And a good cheat for Nigeria is that a lot of its government is based off of the United States. So if you monetary system in the textbook, but did it change and which version should we? It is not only labor. Okay. I like this question a lot. Nigeria was called a multi-party system in the textbook, but did it change to a two-party and which version should we use? Also, did the UK become a mutable party? It is okay. So for Nigeria was a mainly two-party system for the last decade or so, but in the last election, they actually had a third party win some seats. I'm not sure if College Board has updated, and maybe someone else would know. I'm not sure if College Board has updated it to be a multi-party system instead of a two-party system. I think it was a two-party system before, but I don't think College Board has updated it to reflect that a third party has gained power. Do any of my other hosts know?
Usually when changes like this occur, especially between years, the College Board would stray away from a country, but I wouldn't be 100%.
So as somebody who talks to all the teachers that teach AP Comp Gov in the country and all the graders, one of the things, it wouldn't be a multiple choice question because of what David was saying, like they kind of stay away from it. But if it does somehow come up in the FRQs, there are going to be people who are talking about it and they'll know. So it's not like this definitive College Board said this, so therefore it must be that. I wouldn't worry about it in the multiple choice. FRQs, it would be active.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. And then for the United Kingdom, I'm going to get a little bit more into this in a second too. However, there are notable third parties. I think the biggest being the Scottish National Party, which is a Scottish interest party, and then there's also the Liberal Democratic Party. So there are multiple parties in the United Kingdom. However, it is mainly dominated by, here, I'll go over my slide now. It's mainly dominated by the left wing, represented by Labour, and the right wing, represented by Conservative. However, there are those other political parties that can come to power, and they can play important roles. The two most important being the Scottish National Party, which represents Scottish interests, and the Liberal Democratic Party.
Yeah, if I can butt in to this. Sorry, I answered this question in the comment, but we talked about this last preview night, but the UK has a proportional representation. So the reason their multi-party system actually really ties into their election. So this is a great question. So basically it's proportional to how many people vote for a certain party. So if the Labour Party gets 40% of the votes, they get 40% of the seats in the House of Commons. And if the other parties get X amount of percent, they get X amount of percentage of seats, which is why they're able to have so many parties, and it makes it a multi-party because they're not a winner takes all or a first past the post system like us.
Sorry, one moment. Okay. We're talking about Nigeria in the moment we left off, right? Yeah. We got a little sidetracked there, but productive sidetracking. Like I said, Nigeria has 2 strong political parties, and this is a good cheat sheet for Nigeria. If you've taken AP US Gov, it's very similar for Nigeria. They've used a lot of United States political systems, and because of that, they have also developed a 2-party system, like how we developed a 2-party system in America because of our political system. So it's a good cheat sheet to remember that and to kind of get the idea of how the Nigerian government works. However, there are still the specifics that you'll need to know. And like we said, in Russia, it's a dominant party system where the United Russia controls almost all the seats in both the Duma and the Federation Council, their main way of governance. And I see a question about Iran. It is a good question. It's generally you're not going to be asked about Iran in a multiple choice question for party systems because it doesn't fit cleanly into any of these. But in general, it's more of a 1-party system that's kind of controlled by the Supreme Leader and the Guardian Council and such. There's not a lot of room for dissent, but there's not really any like clean political parties. And then for Nigeria, the last thing is that there's ethnic quotas in some of the parties. Because there's many minority groups within Nigeria, the political parties are trying to appeal to these ethnic groups and making sure that they are represented in Congress. So that should be, that's last for this slide. Okay, and then last thing here, we got the how are party systems formed? How do countries get these party systems? So we have electoral laws, right? With the electoral laws, like we brought up before, if there is a single member district system like we have in the United States or within Nigeria, they're more likely to end up as a 2-party system compared to proportional representation. And with proportional representation, you are more likely to have more political parties because each vote is going to be represented. You're voting for a political party, and you don't get into strategic voting like you do with a single member district system. However, you can still see multiple parties in single member districts because of things like social cleavages. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, Scotland, we needed to know about the gender quotas that Mexico. I got 2 questions that popped up and disappeared.
Look, Zach, I'm so sorry. I'm struggling so hard with this. I was actually about to answer one of them, and sorry, I brought them back.
Okay. Mexico, knowing about Mexico's gender quotas that it has in government is going to be very important. And we'll cover that, I'm assuming, more within our actual breakdown. These are just preview nights, like previously said. And so we're going to cover more of that stuff and go more in depth and go more into the content in our actual review nights. So highly recommend going to all of those if you have the time, or if not, going to the recordings. But yes, it is definitely good to know about the Mexica gender quotas. And then, so electoral laws, but we see in social cleavages for like the United Kingdom, for instance, for like Scotland, there's many different ethnic groups in the United Kingdom, the English, the Scottish, the Irish, and the Welsh. And they all have, in the minority countries within the United Kingdom, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, they all have political parties that represent their interests, and they can win seats within those areas. And then there's also obviously historical context that plays into all of it. If like China, for instance, has had the CCP win the Civil War, the Chinese Communist Party won the Chinese Civil War and has been at the forefront of power ever since. And then for role in governance, political parties are very important for shaping policy and organizing government operations. In a 2-party system, one party is normally in complete control, and as such, they have an easier time governing because they only need to consult within that one party, compared to a multi-party system where there needs to be more compromises. And then a one-party system, the same party is always going to be in power, and they don't really care about elections or what the public thinks, and they can go even quicker than a two-party system. Because even though there is only one party in power normally in a two-party system, or at least in a singular chamber, there's going to be sorry, let me rephrase that. Even though that there is only one party in power, they still need to think about the elections and losing that power. So there is still pressure to treat decisions more carefully. And political parties also play very important roles in mobilizing voters. And these last three things, interest aggregation, elite recruitment and socialization, government organization, and policymaking, what this is basically all saying is that political parties play important roles in getting voters out there and educating them and recruiting candidates. They play very important and separate roles from the government in political systems that are democratic. And if we have no further questions, I didn't see any. Maybe David hid them from me again, but yeah, that should be it. And I think David...
I tried my best not to.
No, I answered them.
I figured.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I say done answering, so it's not like crowding the answers.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if you want to take a hit at any of them, Zach, I don't think we're gonna have time for the practice quiz today. Simply because of the mere fact we only have 4 minutes left. But if you want to take a hit at any of the questions on the answered column and to bring more, more like to clarify them, that'd be great. And we're also opening the floor to everybody who's active right now. Please feel free to ask any more questions. We'd love to hear more from you. The link to the presentation, I am actually going to do a call to action right now. So right below our stage, you're going to be able to press a button that says find your slides and cheat sheets here. Everything should be available there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, since we don't have time for practice quiz, you guys can drop questions in the chat, anything really related to what we talked about today or about the exam. Or about the Cram sessions, which start on Friday.
Yes, guys, we hope to see you guys there. We're super excited about the Cram sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be taking lots of questions and chatting with you guys and helping you prepare and feel confident to score perfect F5s on the AP exam. We're really confident all of you guys. You've been asking really good questions. So.
And it really sucks that we unfortunately didn't have time to do the quizzes today, but the quizzes are super fun in the sense that like they're like Kahoot style, so you get the chance to practice your skills and compete with everybody else. So and we'll definitely be doing those during our Cram session nights. The question bank Fiveable provides is amazing, so that's 100% something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And if you're self-studying like I did or like David did, finding questions to review with can be extremely difficult.
Right.
And having Fiveable as a resource to get those questions is very, very helpful.
We do have one question up there. What's the difference between cross-cutting and coinciding cleavages?
I can answer this. So basically, cross-cutting is when like societal divisions, like cleavages, they don't align with one another. So for example, like individuals or groups are divided on one issue and then they align on another issue. Like I'm trying to think of an example, but like religious lines. And if other hosts like have a like specific from the AP6, but coinciding cleavages, they occur when societal divisions overlap or coincide with another, which exacerbates social tensions, and they're like divided along religious and economic lines. I can't really think of an example from the AP6, so if anyone wants to jump in.
Seems no one has any examples from the top of their heads.
I'm just trying to do you guys think like maybe when the like I guess the ethnic divisions in Nigeria or even like Sunni versus Shia Islam, could that be like a coinciding cleavage, where like they're divided both along religious lines, but they exist in the same religious group, right? Like Sunni versus Shia, or is that like Sean? If maybe can you validate that?
Sorry, if we're talking about coinciding, I always talk about Nigeria with religion, geography, those two a lot. If you're in the north, you're probably practice Islam. If you're in the south, you probably practice Christianity. It's just they kind of go together. And now that's not everybody, but it's for the most part. But it is 9 p.m. on the East Coast. That is all that we have for tonight. We hope seriously that you come back, all 63 of you that were here tonight. So we would very much appreciate that, and we look forward to having a lively conversation with you next time. Okay, so I'm going to end this call, but the six hosts, we want to thank them. But you guys stick around because we'll do what we normally do. Okay, bye bye. Have a good day.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.